Oh,
So tonight we are continuing what we started before Holy Week, and that from Exodus 34:6. And we're going to read that verse again. So Exodus 34:6, and this is we're looking at the characteristics of God. So Exodus chapter 34, verse 6. So it went like this, and see what you have it for differences. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Does anybody have some different words in their translation?
I had the Lord, the compassion, then gracious and mostly everything else.
Okay.
It may be different, worded differently, but the same concept.
Yeah.
Same
Merciful compassion. That was the Rachum.
that's right.
So from what we've learned so far in Hebrew, we've got Yahweh, Yahweh, El Rachum, and Hanun, and then our new phrase we're learning tonight is Erech Apayim.
Wow.
So it's two words.
How do you spell?
Erech Apayim. So it's E-R-E-K. It's the first word.
Oh, okay. Erect.
Erech. And the second word is Apayim. A-P-P-A-Y-I-M.
Oh, Apayim.
And we haven't gotten to the last sentence yet. And abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness.
This erect is that anger?
This is anger.
Slow
to anger. It's a phrase, not just a single word. So remember, we've got Exodus. It's starting off with the Lord, Yahweh, Yahweh, which emphasizes it. Like it's emphasizing that this is about God. This is about Yahweh, by saying it twice. And so we've already talked about then El is a name for God. Rachum, so that was compassion or mercy. And then Hanun, that was grace. And now Erech Apayim, which would be slow to anger. So before we get into what this phrase means, I thought we'd start with what are the English sayings to describe someone who gets angry easily, or when somebody's really angry. Because we don't just say, oh, they're angry.
Short temper.
Okay.
Irritable. The slang, pissed off.
Pissed off.
Okay.
You hear that one a lot still.
Yeah. Any other slang?
Short fused.
Yep, the short fuse. That's a good one.
Yeah.
A hothead.
Hot. Yeah, the word hot somehow. Hot tempered.
Mm-hmm.
Boiling.
Okay.
Boiling temper.
Ticked.
Okay.
What was that?
Ticked.
Oh,
Ticked
ticked.
off.
I said
Chipped
chipped.
off.
Yeah. Irate. It's kind of funny how they're kind of the extreme. You can be like isolated.
That's another image.
Yeah. Extremely upset.
Okay. We have a lot of words. Hothead,
Just mad. I guess.
mad.
Flying off the handle.
Oh, there's one.
Oh, yeah.
They're flying off the handle. They've lost it,
Yeah, they've lost it.
whatever it might be.
Thought it was good.
Out of their mind.
We probably have more English phrases for hot-headedness than we do for slow to anger. Because I think a lot of people are that way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what phrase do we have for slow to anger?
Ooh,
Patient?
Yeah,
Mhm.
patient.
Does it still make you angry? I guess
Yeah, you're slow.
it's just still angry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Calm
A
and
righteous.
collected.
What's that?
even tempered.
Calm,
Calm
Uh,
and collected. Even tempered, yeah.
Steady.
Mhm.
grounded.
Hmm.
Grounded. I like that.
A firecracker would be somebody who gets angry.
Oh,
You
yeah.
said that one.
Hmm. Stoic. Don't show any emotion whatsoever.
Emotionless.
Yeah. Calm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not this presence.
Yeah.
Out in left field.
I don't think about that with anger though. I think about that like you're just live.
That's
Yeah.
you're just not even
Slow
present.
to anger, slow to anger.
I suppose if you're out in left field, you might be slow to anger.
I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're not paying attention to anything.
They're sweet.
I think that's not quite.
Did you have another saying? Or
Oh, Bernie said space cadet. I don't think so.
You're rocking.
no,
Uh,
we're getting off of anger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not quite right.
So Hebrew is the same, just like in English, we have different sayings to say that somebody's angry or somebody's slow to anger. And Hebrew also has different sayings to say somebody to emphasize or talk about anger or talk about not being slow to anger. And so the phrase slow to anger, apayam, literally means long of nose. So like
Like
long,
nose?
like
Long.
nose,
Long
Like
nose.
Pinocchio? Long nose?
like Pinocchio. Yeah, long nose like Pinocchio.
Huh.
Long of nose. Arek
Interesting.
apayam
That's what it literally.
literally means long of nose.
Huh.
Now it's often translated as anger because to say that somebody is long of nose means to say that they're slow to anger.
Really? Start using that. You're so long of nose.
So
I admire it.
you should
Oh,
know.
is Pinocchio then come from the Bible because he had a long nose?
Doesn't your nose keep growing like your whole life because the cartilage?
I think so.
That's so-
You
That
could
is
figure
one
out.
of the.
So then the older you get, you should be longer of nose.
Well, it kind of just droops.
It droops.
kind of just droops. Gravity just takes over.
Oh, no.
You gotta hang upside down
Yeah.
like a bat.
Stretch it out.
So erect means long. It's used in other places like long wings, another place in the Bible. So it's used as this to mean long. And apayam is actually a plural form for nose because it talks about the nostrils. So it actually means like long of nostrils. But we would say that in English, long of nose.
Yeah.
That's what we mean. The singular, Hebrew singular for nose is
Hmm.
apayam is nostrils.
How did we
So-
get from Pinocchio to slow to anger?
So that's the phrase. So like in English, we might say they're a hothead. And in
So that was their slang.
that was their slang. Yes. So
Gotcha.
if you're long of nose, you're slow to anger. Is this kind of the slang piece for it? And we're gonna look at some examples to like make this make more sense too.
Opposite of short.
So if you look at,
Okay.
let's look at Genesis chapter 7, verse 22.
Short.
And this in here, it has the word apayam in it, or a form of it.
Chapter 7.
Oh, 7.
Genesis chapter 7, verse 22.
It don't mind us saying nostrils.
Yeah, so notice in here, Hannah, if you'd read yours.
Sure. Thing that had once had the breath of life in its nostrils. Everything on the earth died.
So, and this is NRSV 2 also says, everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life
Died.
That's a really weird way to say something, that the breath was in their nostrils. But it's just that in Hebrew, it's the plural form for nose.
Well, maybe they didn't really understand the language. Yeah.
Well, didn't talk about fish because they don't have nostrils.
Yeah.
Because you
And they're
breathe,
in the water.
you breathe air.
So if you're in the water, you're okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
Instead of driving.
that's when you see the word nostrils, you might be also maybe the word behind it might also be the same one that we're looking at here as the slow to anger. So in Hebrew, there are a number of different words for angry. So this is a phrase that you would say like that you would relate it to like long of nose would mean slow of anger, but there's other words that are used too. Another one is haran, which would be heat, and we use that too. If somebody's a hothead, that would mean they're angry. In Hebrew, they would use the terms heat or like words related with hotness or fire to mean
He's really getting heated.
really
Well,
angry
we still
too.
use it.
They'd especially put sometimes these two together, that if their nose is burning hot, then they're angry.
Sunburn.
Okay, so how do we get here? So if you think about it, if you are really angry, what is something that happens to your face?
It's flush.
It gets
You
flushed.
can feel heat.
And where does that like really be seen the most? Right here on your nose. Like your nose starts to turn red when people get really angry too, depending on your complexion.
Right.
And
like
so
in
somebody has a hot nose, they're angry.
Cartoons, you see this, the steam coming out of their nose.
Yeah.
It's true, because this phrase is used for humans in Hebrew. It's also used for animals. And if you see a really hot, like angry animal, you might see its nostrils flare.
Mhm.
And so that would be if they're long of nose, they've got like these long nostrils.
Some humans can flare their nostrils.
And so that's where this phrase would be coming from. Where having your nose
Interesting.
related with angry. So let's look in Genesis chapter 39. We're going to go to verse 19.
His master heard.
See, all your snow is gone?
Almost.
Except
So
flood.
Really
got-
hot.
muted. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Genesis 39, verse 19. When his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, saying, "This is the way your servant treated me," he became enraged. What do others have for enraged?
I have furious.
Okay.
Heavy burned.
Oh,
Ah,
burn thing.
burned with anger. So that burned with anger is closer to the Hebrew. So the translations you have burned with anger is closer. And literally what it says is his nose burned.
Would be like, is he sick?
But what it means is that you're burning with anger. And we would understand that in English too, that you're burning with anger. So let's go to Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 11. So Proverbs chapter 19, verse 11.
Those with good sense are slow to anger, and it is their glory to overlook an offense.
Any others have anything else?
Oh, the NIV has, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense.
Mine has common sense makes a person slow to anger. It redounds to one's honor to overlook an offense. Say that word, Virgo.
Redounds. Yeah.
So this kind of starts to define for us, this is Arek Apayim, slow to anger. And so we've got long of nose it's describing it to us that like long of nose is somebody who is patient, someone who carries wisdom or good sense. Somebody who's able to let go of things and not have their anger flash up. So that's what it's defining for us, this long of nose. Can you think of other places in the Bible where smells matter?
Smells.
Well, when Lazarus came out of the grave.
Yeah,
Stinketh.
Yeah.
stinketh. Somebody said that they whenever they preach that they always bring a can of Febreze.
Oh, that's cute.
He stinketh. Go to Genesis 8. We've got this anger which is related to nose, but as it's heard, it would just be heard as anger because it's the phrase. But Genesis 8, verse 20 and 21.
Oh, sure.
And we have this other place where it's talking about smells in relationship with God. So God, it says God is long of nose. And chapter 8, verse 20 and 21. Then Noah built an altar to Yahweh and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when Yahweh smelled the pleasing odor, Yahweh said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth, nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. So it's interesting that one of the important parts of the faith tradition early on, especially, is this offering of a soothing or pleasing aroma. There's this pleasing odor that is given up to God. And this pleasing odor, in this especially, this pleasing odor is satisfying God, and it is literally making God be less angry. Because the word soothing aroma, or this pleasing odor, the Hebrew behind this, is tied with the words for like rest and settle and tranquility. So if you have a long nose, if you are really angry, but to counter that, you would have literally, you would have pleasing smells. You would have rest, tranquility, settledness in order to calm an anger. And if we go into the New Testament, so this concept is even carried forward into the New Testament in kind of a subtle way. So if you go to Ephesians, and chapter 5, verse 2. It starts with 1. Therefore, be intimidators of God as beloved children. and live in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Which is kind of a weird, like, the guy who sat in a tomb for a few days, we
Yeah.
had the Lazarus story, Lord, he stinketh, like, you do
Mhm.
not want to go in there. And here, offered a fragrant offering. That this smell, like, it's so important that they're carrying this word, this imagery,
Yeah, connected to sacrifice again.
connected to sacrifice again. And I wonder too if it's connected with their understanding of anger too, or an understanding of that we are seeking tranquility and rest and settling. So we're going to go more into the anger piece now. And we've got, so anger, when you think about anger, there's different types of anger. And I'm going to divide it in just two main pieces. One, there would be anger as protection. So like if you were to see a child in danger, you might feel a flash of anger, and that anger may motivate you to like go and help the child and stop whatever's happening, or another person, or whatever it might be. Where like anger can be that which motivates us and helps to stop something from occurring. And can be, so anger is protection. There's another type of anger, which is the anger as abuse, because anger could also be that which is used to harm other people. So anger can be used to protect creation, or anger can be used to harm creation and all that within it. So when we, and how we're interpreting the Bible depends on our own experiences, our own backgrounds within our lives. Whether we hear when God, it says God got angry, are we hearing anger as a word that is saying God got moved to protect them? Or do we hear God got angry and God started abusing them? And that changes kind of, it really changes our understanding of it. So let's look into the places where God gets angry first in the Bible. Where do you think God first gets angry? Any guesses? What book?
Genesis.
Okay, Genesis. What do others think?
Yep, Genesis.
Genesis?
He has lots of emotions in Genesis.
There's a lot of
God.
emotions in Genesis. First time God gets angry is in Exodus.
It's Exodus.
It's Exodus.
He doesn't get angry?
He doesn't get angry. God is
Kicks him out?
never described, we're gonna look at that. God is never described as
Not with
being
Moses.
angry.
Or not Moses, Noah.
There's a lot of other, but
Not Noah, but the people. No.
the first time God is named as getting angry is with
Oh.
Moses.
It is
Moses,
Moses, yeah.
Exodus,
Right, I meant to say Noah. Okay.
4,
Oh, when he,
Exodus, when
Exodus chapter 4,
he was gonna kill him?
verses 10 through 15.
when he doesn't want to be sent.
Moses doesn't want to be sent,
Maybe.
and God gets angry. But Moses said to God, "Oh my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be your mouth and will teach you what you are to speak." But he said, "Oh Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. So this is the first time God is described as being, as like anger for God, and that's being this motivating factor. Now there's some pieces that are happening around this. This is the 5th time that Moses objects to God. So this is not the first time Moses is like, "God, I don't think I can do that." This is the 5th time.
Trying to make it clear.
The other thing, what happens after this? God's anger is kindled against Moses, and God said, What of your brother Aaron? I know that he can speak fluently. Even now, he's coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him and put your words in your mouth. God doesn't punish Moses at all. Punishment is not connected with this first act of anger. And actually, what God does is God adapts to Moses's needs. So God, after this 5 times of like Moses saying, God, I don't think I can do that. Nope, here's my reason I can't do that. Here's all my excuses. God's angry, and then God adapts to Moses's needs and gives an alternate to that Moses can agree to. So which one did you say this anger was? Anger as protection or anger as abuse?
Anger is protection.
Okay. Let's go forward to Exodus. This is to the second time that God is named as being angry. Exodus 15, verses 4 through 8. Exodus chapter 15, verses 4 through 8. So this is, the Israelites have been freed. They are going across the Reed Sea, and we have this poetry. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he cast into the sea. His picked officers were sunk in the Reed Sea. The floods covered them, and they went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power, your right hand, O Lord, shattered the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrew your adversaries. You sent out your fury. It consumed them like stubble. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood up in a heap. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea.
There's those nostrils again.
Yeah. So we've got, you sent out your fury. You might have other words. Are they all anger kind of related?
Wrath.
Wrath.
Like a fire.
This is in verse 7.
You unleashed your burning anger.
Your burning
You're burning
anger.
again.
Yep. The Hebrew behind this is like a hot anger.
Mm.
It's not the same one as what's used in other ones, but it's a hot
Mine's
anger.
wrath like fire.
And then
Huh.
in 8, at the blast of your nostrils.
Such a funny picture, yeah. God.
Which, when we remember, nostrils also relates with anger. It's like at the blast of your anger, you made this, would be another way to hear that. So God is angry, and God drowns the Egyptians in this. This is definitely a consequence that occurs here, I would say. God's anger results in the Egyptians then are drowned. But we remember what happened before this. So why were at the beginning of Moses' story, what happened? What did Pharaoh do at the beginning of Moses' story?
Come out of the river, no.
It has to do with water. So at the beginning of Moses' story, Moses was pulled out of the river by Pharaoh's daughter. Why was Moses in the
As a
river?
baby.
Oh, because they're killing all the first.
Because they're
Males.
killing all the firstborn. They are drowning all of the children.
Just a little drowning of children.
So they're doing a drowning of children at the beginning of Pharaoh's story. And when God's anger is moved, Pharaoh is drowned in those who did it. And so part of what's happening here is God's anger is reflecting the consequences of Pharaoh's own decisions and of the Egyptians' own decisions. And so it's not just a arbitrary consequence that's occurring. This is connected directly with what decisions they have already made. So would you say this anger, it's also, would you say this is an anger of protection or anger of abuse?
Protection. He's protecting the Israelites.
Protecting the Israelites.
But he's abusing
The
the
Egyptians.
Egyptians.
Somebody's hurting.
Somebody's hurting. Yep.
Losing.
So it could be seen abusing the Egyptians.
Hmm.
Yeah, but usually if you protect someone, there's always someone who's going to get hurt too.
Yeah.
Do they deserve it or not?
Well, I would argue that the Hebrew scriptures aren't trying to say who deserved it and who didn't. They're just they're just trying to they don't stand in the way of the consequences of one's own decisions. And so the Pharaoh and the Egyptians, the consequences of their decisions to drown and imprison people ended up for God being that for God, the justice was that they would also see the same consequences upon which they had heaped upon others. And remember, in this Old Testament, we've got also the scripture an eye for an eye. Like,
Yeah.
and so we're seeing, and it's not meant, I don't think, as like, if you do something bad's going to happen to you. It's not a karma type thing. It's when we make decisions, there are consequences, good or bad, and we have to live with these consequences. And God
Live or die with them.
live or die with them.
Yes.
But it's a hard word to wrap our minds around. So let's look at the last time God's anger appears in Exodus. This is Exodus 32, verse 7. So Exodus chapter 32. Verse 7. And it's 7 to 14. The Lord said to Moses, "Go down at once. Your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt, have acted perversely. They have been quick to turn aside from the way I commanded them. They have cast for themselves an image of a calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed to it. And these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." The Lord said to Moses, "I have seen this people, how stiff-necked they are. Now let me alone, so my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, and of you I will make a great nation." This is, so some argue this is actually the first time that anger is associated with punishment. That it wasn't that with Pharaoh and the chariots, it was just consequences of decisions that were being made. They decided that they were going to follow and try to re-imprison the people. But this one, God is angry, and God says, "Let my wrath burn hot against them, that I might consume them." But it seems like maybe this is connected potentially with a punishment. What do you hear in this one? Do you remember what God does after this?
He doesn't do it, does he?
No, God doesn't do
Forgive
it.
Or he relents or
Moses-
something.
Moses
Moses
talks
like-
them out of it.
Moses
do it.
talks God out of it and does not consume them.
It seems like God's having a hot moment, when you let your anger get a hold of you a little bit and then you calm down.
God's long of nose
Very-
became
Or
short.
human things are, yes. Yes.
So this is the first time it's like, so God doesn't actually do any punishment with this, despite the words being said. But this is not the first time that in the Bible stories, God is described as having brought judgment or death, which is probably the stories that you were thinking of when I asked, what's the first places that you think God is angry? in these stories of Genesis.
Yeah,
So let's look at Genesis,
let's see,
like Genesis chapter 3.
drowns people, gets mad at Adam. and Eve.
Yeah, or just bring it to mind. We don't have to, because it's a longer story. We don't have to read them.
Which one is?
Genesis chapter 3 is when Adam and Eve are put out from the garden.
Hmm.
Okay. And so what happens in that story? It doesn't say that God got angry. So Genesis, if you want to turn to it, it's Genesis chapter 3. Otherwise, just bring the story to mind.
It's told as a punishment.
It's told as
Mine says punishment.
a punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the fabled story that a lot of people would tell. They were punished.
But what does God do while God throws them out?
As he's throwing them out,
Yeah,
we give him clothes.
gave them clothes. God gave them
Right.
clothes as God threw them out. Is that like God clothed
Very
them?
And
steady.
he got rid of the leaves and gave them skins.
Had them leave, maybe not through.
Which is kind of a weird, like if it was just a pure punishment,
Just send them
I don't
out.
think God would have clothed them. Like you don't clothe people, you're just punishing. But God clothed them. And then we hear the Lord God said this, see, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now he might reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat it and live forever. Therefore, the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. So he clothed them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that caused the problem is that they took from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that caused damage. And so God, for some reason, it would cause more damage, it seems, if they were to take from the tree of life and live forever. And so potentially what God's doing here in this story is it's not an angry punishment, maybe not even a punishment at all. God is preventing further consequences from occurring. And so God removes those further consequences by taking them out, giving them clothes, giving them an opportunity to till the ground, and placing this flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life, which we could see, one way we could see it is guard the way as in preventing, like, you're being punished so you can't go in there. Or it could also be like a baby gate. We put this baby gate up so you don't fall down the stairs anymore because you are spiritual infants.
Yes.
So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I was looking at the next story with it has the word punishment on Cain and Abel.
Yes.
And it's exactly what you say. Sort of punishes Cain for killing Abel by he can't till the soil anymore, but then he makes it so no one can kill Cain. A little mark on him.
Right. The punishment for murder in this time is death. God does not kill Cain.
Or doesn't let anyone else kill him either. Yeah.
So in Genesis 4, Cain kills Abel, and God goes to Cain and gives a punishment, but the punishment is to prevent Cain from doing any more harm. And God doesn't kill Cain, and God puts a protection upon Cain that no more harm will come upon him. That's a weird punishment. For
Yeah. He has to wander, but he won't know. Well, he's like an even-tempered parent
with a long nose.
with very long nose and very reasonable.
So let's
But
look
yes,
at the
not angry.
flood story.
Not angry.
So the flood story, we've talked about Adam and Eve here, Garden of Eden, we've talked about Cain and Abel. This is when the flood story, the whole world except Noah's family is killed. So flood story, Genesis 6 it's chapters 6 through 8 is the
Yeah.
story of the flood. And so it starts, let me find the verse here.
Oh, it pained God's heart.
Yeah, so what
Oh.
verse number is that?
6, chapter 6, verse 6.
Yeah, would you read it for me?
Yahweh was sorry that humankind had been created on earth. It pained God's heart.
So what's the motivation for God flooding the world?
Sad.
It's grief. Grief is the motivation,
Yeah.
not anger is the motivation.
Mhm.
Then if we go to chapter 6, verse 13. Now in the NRSV, it says this, and God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I'm going to destroy them along with the earth. Do others have anything different here? Especially the first half. I have determined to make an end of all flesh.
I just have, I'm going to put an end to all people.
Okay, I'm going to put an end to all people. Hannah, do you have anything different in yours?
What's the first part of yours?
And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them.
Mine says that the end of all flesh has come before me, for they are the cause of all its violence. A weird way to put it.
So Hannah's, the inclusive Bible, might be a little closer to the Hebrew. So here are these different phrases. I have determined to make an end of all flesh versus the end of flesh has come before me.
Like he didn't do it.
What's the difference between those two?
God's not taking responsibility. That's sort of, he's not taking the anger part.
When I hear it,
Yeah,
for
go
me,
ahead.
the difference is like the end of flesh has come before me. It's like saying creation is already ruined. Humanity is already at their end.
Yes.
Whereas saying in the NRSV, I have determined
I
I'm
did
going to end
Yeah,
them.
I'm gonna put an end to all people. I'm going to do
This is more like natural consequences because of what happened.
Right.
Like you were saying earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So the end of flesh has come before me. Creation is already ruined because of the violence that is within creation. So what does God do? God ends the suffering that is already the end, that's on this total downward spiral. God stops it and creates an opportunity for renewal, wipes it all clean and creates a chance for renewal.
And what's the last part of yours? The last sentence?
In that first same thing.
After violence.
Now I am going to destroy them along with the earth.
Yeah, mine's basically. I will destroy them.
So some things to think about, just
Oh,
this.
gosh.
Hi, Camille.
She just came back now.
Was I unmuted that whole time?
No,
Uh,
My
we
son
couldn't-
was just,
you were muted. You were muted.
You were,
Oh, I thought you were trying to say something.
I asked my son to come over and bring a bookcase upstairs. And as he was bringing it upstairs, it fell into a million pieces. And then he said, well,
Oh.
Mom, tomorrow is cleanup day for you. Ah! So we got a bunch of junk out for cleanup day.
it's not. It's been moved to May, Camille.
What?
That
Did you
face.
see that face?
I did see that was impressive. It's like
Yeah.
a commercial. Because of the weather or what?
It's all on the
Belong-
boulevard, right?
You can move everything.
Somebody
Did it
might-
get moved to May?
Might if they don't see the news. I guess. I might take it.
Well, they just might take it all anyway. Who knows?
They might.
Or leave
But
me a
just-
nasty note. I don't know.
Or it moved to May, so you have more time.
Oh, okay.
The dumps are probably too wet.
Maybe too wet. too much.
Mid-May because of the snow.
Hmm.
Nuts. Well, my son did it all anyway, and I'm so grateful. Just-
Barak apayim, belong of nose.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he didn't know it either. And I lost my notes. There
That
they
was
are.
supposed to be.
Okay. I'm sorry
So-
for interrupting.
So with this kind of relooking at slow anger, and God is or anger is protection versus anger is abuse. Does this add a little different understanding of the characteristic of God? I know when we first read this, we read it and we read the story beyond it, before it, and we were like, how is God slow to anger in the
Mhm.
midst of this? Does it make a little more sense now that we look at these stories maybe a little differently?
Mhm. Yeah. Worded, I guess.
So there's,
What God does.
yeah, there's some things about in Hebrew, like we miss in the translations, which is why it's helpful to have. And I think one of the big things is the way that, like, a lot of people, I've heard many people say, the God of the Old Testament is this angry, wrathful God.
Well, we picture it that way
Right.
because of some of the action. We think,
Mhm.
oh, flooding.
But the God described in the Old Testament
Right, it's not.
is this slow to anger,
Yeah.
and a God that allows allows the consequences of decisions to be brought forth. And in fact, may even expedite the consequences of decisions so that suffering can stop.
Mm-hmm. You picture more fear in the Old Testament for some reason, but maybe that was a part of
Mhm.
something, like the people were more afraid or something.
So the word fear that's used in the Old Testament, it's not, we use fear a little differently.
Mhm.
Fear also had attached to it like an awe, a
Right.
sense of like, it's more of like you might have experienced fear and trembling if you stood at the top of a cliff and you watched the sun set. Like that
Which
would
is a
be
good.
an awe and trembling that you might feel.
So maybe it's all the translation again.
It's not a fear like somebody has a hammer above your head.
Yeah.
Type fear.
Mhm.
It's about to drop.
Mhm.
So I want us to go to Romans. So let's go. Oh, I have a video too. So Romans chapter 1, verse 18. So this is in Romans, Paul is writing to the Romans and describing God's anger and explaining how does this work. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of those who by their wickedness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Ever since the creation of the world, God's eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things God has made, so they are without excuse. For though they knew God, they did not honor God as God or give thanks to God, but they became futile in their thinking, and in their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling a mortal human being, or birds, or four-footed animals, or reptiles. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust for their hearts to impurity, to the degrading of their bodies among themselves. And it goes on. For this reason, God gave them up to degrading passions. So in here, we've got, and in 28, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind and to things that should not be done. So here, Paul is describing that this wrath of God is God giving the people what they keep asking for.
Mhm.
That is how God's like anger is lived out. That the people keep asking for this, and God tells them multiple times in the Bible, you really don't want this. And finally,
Mhm.
God's like, okay, like you've made your decisions, you here, have it. But at the same time, Paul talks later in Romans chapter 2 that God is chapter 2 verses 1 through 4, that God also gives time for people to change. And
Because he's slow to anger.
because God's slow to anger, right?
Long ago.
Which means God is slow to give us what we want, because often what we want is not really very good for us. So we're at 7 o'clock here. I do have a Bible project video talking about the slow to anger. But I want to tell you first, in case somebody needs to leave, that we do have, so we'll have class next week on loyal love. May 1st, we won't have class. And then we will have class again May 8th and May 15th. And then we'll start our summer series. So we're going to do a summer series starting on June 5th. Unfortunately, the summer series will only work in person, because what we're going to do is we're partnering with Edgewood Village, and we're going to meet in their movie
Oh.
theater, and we're going to watch The
Oh.
Chosen and talk about, so what The Chosen series is it retells parts of the Bible. And so we'll talk about that and look at the scriptures, see what differences there are. What do we agree with? What do we disagree with the way that it's being presented? And so that'll be at 6:30 on Monday nights.
Where Howard and Louise.
It's where Howard and
Oh.
Louise live,
And,
Richard Lang's there
yeah.
too. So a number of our members
That's
live at
awesome.
Edgewood Village, so they would be able to come as well, and we're invited, and it's in their movie theater.
Yeah. Is that Mondays in a row or?
It's gonna be every Monday.
Okay.
We're gonna partner with Good Shepherd Lutheran Church too. So they're gonna
Nice.
join us as
You
well.
say this starts June 5th?
It starts June 5th and it'll go throughout the summer on Mondays at 6:30. It's a little different start time. And we'll have information in the newsletter too.
Okay.
But so if you want to come to that, but we'll finish up this Exodus 36 and the characteristics of 34 verse 6, characteristics of God before we start the Chosen series.
Will there be another season out by then?
There might be. I think we're going to start with season 1. So
Yeah, people.
yeah,
I have, let's see. What, are they on season 3?
2. 2's what's out. now.
2's out, yeah.
I don't know if 3's, could be out someplace, but
Did I see?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
season 2? I definitely saw 1.
I saw 1 and then so I'm
Very
starting
good.
to watch 2.
Oh, you are.
so I'm going to stop the recording, but then we're going to watch the video of Slow to Anger. And if people are watching the recording later, the link to Slow to Anger will just be in the description.